There's no denying, bolt actions and escape from Tarkov can provide you some of the best kill satisfaction the game can offer. Oh! But if you're going for shooter born in heaven or simply just enjoy sniping, the truth is bolt actions actually received a sneaky shadow buff. So today we're going over what my thoughts are on the best bolt actions and some builds and recommendations along the way. So first of all, what changed within the bolt action platform? Well, the truth is a lot of the different barrels, whether they're large or small, actually did receive some buffs. And these buffs are basically to do with velocity. So pretty much every single barrel across the board for every bolt action in the game received a higher velocity buff. This is around about 20 to 30% across the board, with some of them being closer to about 10 to 15%. Now this is really important because there wasn't really a reason to run bolt actions in Tarkov over running like a DMR, but now the bolties shoot a lot flatter than some of the DMRs can offer within the same caliber. The shorter barrels also received a little bit of a nerf, so an example would be the sawn-off Mosin barrel now actually reduces your velocity by about 50% more, but it also actually reduces your ergo less. This is not a bad thing because across the board, but I think what they're trying to do is that shorter barrels in Tarkov will affect you more negatively in velocity, and longer barrels will give you a better reward in terms of velocity. So let's talk about buying bolt actions and what you need to know about prices. The VPO 215 is the cheapest at around 18,000 rubles and is a really good budget slapper. Another really good budget option is getting your hands on an SV98 or a Mosin. Now, the Mosin is only slightly cheaper than the SV98 at 42,000 rubles, and you can get it much cheaper on the flea, but just be careful with that durability. The SV98 is 45,000 rubles now, as it received, in fact, a nerf to the price, which is kind of shitty if you ask me, but is now a little bit more expensive. The M700 is still pretty good value at $390 US. This is roughly 44,000 rubles, so around about the same price anyway, and is a good option, especially with M80 being such a valid round in the early game. As for other bolt actions, we have a choice between the DVL and the T5000. Now the DVL was a little bit expensive at about 80k, but it is a really good option. Now, the Orsus T5000 is around about 70,000 rubles, but can be cheaper on the flea, especially since a lot of people find these in crates. I find that you find a lot of high durability ones for around about the 60,000 mark, which is actually really good. Now, when it comes to max gear, there is a little bit of a cheeky trade here, which I literally do off cooldown, and that is buying a military power filter and then going over to Skier Max and trading this for a integrated suppressed DVL. Now, this thing is amazing and is a really good value because you can get power filters for around about 70k, but sometimes on the high end of 80k. So when it comes to comparing the different bolties, you need to understand that each caliber comes with its strengths and weaknesses. The VPO 215 is incredibly cheap, and its velocity got buffed, which is really awesome. When you add AP 366, which is definitely the only round I would recommend running in this gun, it does lose a lot of accuracy and can be very hard to hit ranges at around about 150 meters. The Mosins as well changed a little bit, and what I find really interesting is now that the infantry carbine is actually a really good option. Now, it has better ergonomics than the bolt action sniper rifle variant with the longer barrel, as well as the fact that the muzzle velocities are very similar now, with the sniper rifle variant's only main strength being you can mount a PU scope. When it comes to the SV98 still does not shoot as fast as the Mosin. That is only the real big difference here. But with the larger capacity and the higher ergo, the SV98 is a really solid option. I've been running this gun a lot, especially to do a lot of my sniper quests. 7.6254R PS is 7N1 in an older patch, and is still a really good round, especially when one-tapping level 4 armors and a lot of the different level 3 armors in the game, which is something that you'll run into more commonly than you think. Now, enough about 7.6254R, let's work our way up to the NATO guns. And the M700 was one of those guns that actually received the buff. Not only did the 20-inch barrel receive a buff in terms of velocity and also ergonomics, but I did want to point out that the gun statistically is pretty solid. As well as the fact that now that if you go through a little bit of effort and buy the 26-inch barrel, which is pretty baller, but just be aware that you're ringing the dinner bell every time you fire this. The main reason to run the 26-inch barrel is look at that velocity. At 971 meters per second, that is pretty damn nuts, considering I don't even have a high velocity round loaded in the chamber. Next up is the T5000, and if we look at it side by side against the M700, it is a bit of an unfair comparison. The T5000 destroys it in ergonomics and also recoil. The main real difference here being the fact that the M700 with the long barrel has slightly better muzzle velocity. But that slight marginal difference here doesn't really mean a lot, and we'll talk about the reasons why I think so later in the video. But as we work our way up towards the DVL versus the Ursus versus the M700, this is mainly your big competition rifles here. And I want to go ahead and point out that the DVL on the far left is just killing it. It is not only better in terms of weight than the T5000, but it trades blows in terms of ergonomics, as well as the fact that it has the lowest recoil out of all the three rifles and the highest standard meters per second velocity. Now, if we compare the loud DVL compared to the suppressed one that I did that really awesome trade for earlier, it actually has 3 points of additional ergo, as well as the fact that it only weighs slightly more. The best part is its recoil is somehow lower, which is kind of nuts, and the muzzle velocity now after the buffs at 951 meters per second is actually absolutely nutty, especially due to the fact I don't even have a round loaded yet. Now let's quickly talk about ammo. Now M62 is probably your entry round here, especially for sniping, when you're looking for that bullet drop and trying to adjust for it. I did want to point out that M62 does have a -6 accuracy modifier, but in the grand scheme of things doesn't make a huge difference. It does have a slower muzzle velocity at 860 meters per second. Whereas if we look at M61, it does move a lot faster at 849 meters per second, and M993 being the fastest at 910 meters per second. It does add a little bit more recoil, but the main difference is it does increase your accuracy by 5%. Now, the interesting thing about the ammo that you choose is it affects your gun the moment it's in the chamber. So if we have a look at a DVL here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an M62 in the chamber, and immediately the muzzle velocity will actually go down by about 17, as well as the fact that the MOA will go from 0.45 to 0.47. Now remember guys, the lower the MOA, the better the spread of the gun. So essentially imagine a gun with 0 MOA would hit in the same spot every single time. Now if I put M61 in a T5000 and also in a DVL and look at the two side by side, we'll immediately notice that the DVL still has higher muzzle velocity, as well as the fact that the MOA of the DVL with M61 is absolutely nutty at 0.42, which is pretty damn good. Now, it gets even better if you use 993, and this is when we start to crack the 1,000 meter mark. Now, this is actually amazing. Have a look at that muzzle velocity on both of them. 1,067 meters per second on the DVL now, as well as the fact that the T5 has 1,053. And part of the reason that I love the DVL so much is that we'll see that even the suppressed variant with the short barrel, which costs us around 75,000 rubles max, I would say, without a scope here, is already cracking over the 1,000 meter mark at 1,039 meters per second with great weight and great ergo. So this brings us to our next part of comparing snipers, and probably one of the most important decisions you need to make when choosing the right sniper, and that is how quickly can I rack the bolt, and also how good is the sight picture during. Now, we're going to actually start you guys off with the king here, and I think one of the best case scenarios, and that is the T5000. It's still really good. And what we'll notice when firing the T5000 is that we fire and then we have really good sight picture the entire way through with the bolt. Now, it's not a straight pull bolt, but what's really interesting is the animation is the cleanest and doesn't deviate us from our target as much as all the others. When choosing the bolt action, you don't need to worry about recoil, because recoil is only the initial climb, but that doesn't really matter so much because the initial climb already stops after you fire and then you've already started the bolt. So how much you climb doesn't really matter all that much because the bolt will automatically take over and you'll have a downtime regardless. In something like a DMR, it'll make a lot more of a difference. But if we notice something like the DVL actually has a really bad rack animation, which is one of the reasons it gets let down in this category. The M700 actually has one of the worst rack animations in the entire game, in my humble opinion. It is very shaky from left to right, as well as the fact that some of the higher recoil builds can make it very wobbly and kind of distracting. We went through every single bolt action one by one, and I noticed that some of the different bolt actions, especially the Mosin, were friggin' terrible. I don't know whether it was the way that I mounted the scope simply to keep the comparison fair, but this thing was swinging all over the place and was very hard to use. Although it did allow me to take a shot quite quickly on the follow-up, it was very wobbly and very hard to keep track of. One of my personal standouts here when testing this was the 215, which I found out was one of the fastest firing bolt actions in the game. It allowed you to take a follow-up shot faster than any other bolt in the entire category. This makes it a really good option, especially when you're spamming at close range, as well as the fact that AP366 is an absolute monster round in CQC. So ultimately, guys, there's a lot of different ups and downs for every sniper in the platform right now. I'm just going to go ahead and let you guys know a few of my standouts right now. The first one would be the VPO 215. This thing is a little underrated budget slapper and is an amazing gun. I did a lot of my Jaeger shooter tasks in factory with it and a lot of different quests when I was starting out in the game. I did want to point out, if you do use this gun, try to keep the durability at 100 and don't go ahead and use the scav ones, as they are so inaccurate it's not even funny. I'd be running 366 AP minimum in this gun. The next standout in the mid-tier budget build would definitely be the SV98. The SV98 with something simple like an LCAN and PS in the mag is about as good as it gets. You can go through the effort of suppressing it, but understand that the gun is incredibly heavy, and if you are going to suppress it, you do need to play a lot more passive. When it comes to 7.6251, this one is a very tough choice when we're in the higher end. Now, I'm not a big fan of the M700. In real life, I am. It's a beautiful weapon, and I really respect it. But when it comes down to Tarkov, it's simply not good. It has bad ergonomics, as well as the fact that the rack animation is kind of terrible. It can be cheap at times, but if you spend all this money making a really expensive, awesome looking M700, it's not going to help you even remotely in the slightest, because the animation is slow and it is very sluggish and heavy. So that leaves us with another two guns here, and it's the T5000 versus the DVL. Now, I wanted to point out that there's different scenarios where either one is the one to choose. Now, for the DVL, I just wanted to point out that the suppressed short barrel variant is an absolute killer weapon. I've been using this pretty much exclusively through that power filter trade, and has been doing me a world of wonders. It is nice and quiet, as well as the fact that it's got good ergo and it's nice and light. The main real difference is if I'm set up in a certain location, sometimes I regret using the DVL. This is simply due to the fact that the T5000 has the cleanest bolt animation out of all of them. If you do take a shot, however, you can negate this by holding down the left click, and then the moment you let go, that's when he'll rack the bolt. So you can keep eyes on what you're shooting at to look for an impact. Though I did want to note, the moment you let go, that animation on the DVL can be quite jank. If I'm doing a lot of sniping on woods from long distance, the T5000 is the standout for me here today. Not only is that muzzle velocity so phenomenal, but that follow-up animation is just too clean to go past. However, if you're more of an active sniper like I am, sometimes that T5000 is simply just too slow and heavy. That's why I prefer the DVL with like a backup SMG of some description. So really, when it comes down to it, the two T5000 and the DVL are my favorite two. I can't even pick the two apart because they're just so situational. The DVL is the king of repositioning, light ergo, and also a really nice package, whereas the T5000 is the king of long range and also follow-up shots. Hey guys, that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this type of content. If you did, consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps out a lot. If you guys have any questions about today's video, or you just want to come and chat shit with me, I stream Tarkov pretty much every day. The link for that will be featured down below. I'd really love to see you there. It'd be awesome. Hope you guys have a great night, great morning, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.